It's like a tsunami, but once it hits, it's just
Yeah.
all the way through the finals.
And Josiah, your hand is full.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
How you doing?
Nice.
Congratulations.
I don't have all my questions.
Yo, you going to the look for small. Okay.
I've never had. Yeah, it's my first time.
Wait, you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait. I feel like I think cater up like after.
Really?
Oh, well, you gotta, I forgot, yeah, she moderating the conversation in there. You hear, right?
You have a few minutes to eat, though. I wouldn't worry about it.
Machine coming up right now, but I'm just saying,
I'm Josiah.
Oh, hi, Josiah. Nice to meet you. I'm Catalina.
You already know James from Toy Hall?
No.
I got one.
Hi.
Like,
Nice to meet you.
Where are you?
I'm a senior.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Graduating soon.
Yeah.
What do you study?
Global affairs. Wait.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've worked at Whitehall now or I worked last year before on the student executive committee, so I've been involved since I was a first year. You know Peter and I know David. Yeah. And then like I'll just because I do work with Jonathan Fanson.
I used to.
I'm
Long
his
time.
assistant. So I
You're
figured
kidding. Oh,
in
well, that's a
his email.
coincidence.
And I was like, I feel like I recognize him.
He hired me 30 years ago. We worked together for several years and then became friends. He's been a mentor to me all that time. So that's nice. So you're
Yeah.
helping with technology.
Technology, printing, emails. He's getting older now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's a nice connection.
he's really very good. I see your emails and newsletters from Casa. Yeah. You stay in touch.
Yeah, I just saw him a couple weeks ago. He was honored at this. Are you familiar with Yana?
Mhm.
Yale Alumni Network?
Yale Alumni Network.
He received one of their awards
Mm.
in New York a couple weeks back. So,
You gave a speech, right?
yeah, he gave a brief speech and also he was introduced very nicely by this guy who'd been a student.
But yeah, yes, I do. Yeah. Wow, that's really great for to count.
Well, it's good that you're there because, he's certainly these people that for his career, basically, he had a staff of people to support him and now that
Yeah.
he's retired, he doesn't. So it's a bit of an abrupt transition.
Because he used to work, he's like with Arthur at Martin Academy of Arts and Sciences. He already had executive assistant.
Yeah.
Now he's living at home in Camden since now, and it's just
Yeah.
so it's very fun. But even though he's retired, he's working. Like his schedule's almost as good as mine. I don't know how
The way he's always.
He's operating. He has a lot of energy. Yeah, it's impressive actually.
Hi, just
Hi, Marie.
were you interested?
Yeah. Up there.
So Whitehall is another big event tomorrow, right? Probably will attract quite a few folks. The Anthony Abraham Jack event, is that?
Yes, that's true.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming, and spending some time of your day with us. I'll just run through the general format of the event, but it should be pretty casual and intimate. We have a few panel questions for James and Josiah, but it should flow naturally like a discussion. But if you guys could just each just start with like an intro of yourself and like your professional and educational background, or just anything about you that will help us better understand you.
Let me go first. Okay, sure. So Josiah Brown, I live here in New Haven. I'm saying I've been here on and off since 1988. And first brought me here was I was an undergrad and involved in Whitehall as a student, ended up majoring in history, and returned to New Haven after some time mainly in New York back in 2002. So I worked in education and more recently in the nonprofit sector in child welfare.
James Judge, born and raised in New Haven. Yeah, live in Harvard now. Director of Civic and Rescue Care at the Whitehall and co-founder and director of the Citizens Coalition. Yes, that's it.
Right, awesome. And I'm Emily. I work at Whitehall as a student employee, and I'm currently a junior majoring in ethics, politics, and economics. So just to start off the panel with a question, what events or experiences would you guys say like most shaped your commitment to public service?
Music, you like to go first?
Public service. I grew up. Well, I guess. I guess it needs to do these things in New Haven called like the New Haven cleanups, and so like you would like come out on a Saturday morning and it'd be a ton of people, and my mother was like super active and like a local soup kitchen that my aunt ran, and she would always take us out to these cleanups and these clean up neighborhood. At the end of the cleanup, they give you like a sub and a soda. But it was like, so like those were like my like introduction as a child to like the serving my community.
And I guess I would say, as a teenager, I had a summer job for several years, both in college and then and earlier in high school, with this environmental group called CONPERG, the Connecticut Public Interest Research Group, which is part of this national movement. And for me, that was really a formative experience, going door to door, having to raise money, as well as build awareness about various environmental causes. And also, among other things, here at Whitehall, I worked with a boy at that time. He was 9 when we met, and I was a freshman. So I was his so-called big brother, and we got to know each other. And so all through college, I worked with him, and we've stayed in touch. So now we're back in touch. He's now in his 40s. He has a son. I have kids. So that's nice that, we've continued to have a relationship. And so a few other examples potentially, but I don't want to belabor. We have limited time.
No worries. That kind of just leads me to my next question about like local and state work in general, or like specifically. Like I know you guys both talk about your start in service, but how did that lead into like work in the local and state sector specifically?
So I guess I would say when I was an undergrad, I volunteered on a few political campaigns. I now work in a very nonpartisan or bipartisan role in the nonprofit sector, but I did volunteer on some political campaigns, including the first campaign of Rosa DeLauro back in 1990. And as probably many of you know, she was elected and has been in Congress ever since. So then I was an intern in her office my senior year in 91, 92. And then I was for about a year and a half a federal employee. My first job right out of college was doing constituent service for Rosa here in New Haven. So that was, I learned a little bit about many different things. And though we were working at the federal level, we took calls, as you can imagine, from constituents on a wide range of issues, including often local issues, state issues. So we would often refer the constituents calling in to, the city of New Haven or the town of Hamden or the state of Connecticut, as well as connecting to the federal agency. So that was a really good introduction to, I guess, the public sector more broadly.
interesting. I never thought about like the politics um at any point other than like from like growing up as except for like the sensationalism of it, like watching like being a teenager and watching like the Clinton impeachments and like it was just all entertainment. It wasn't real. I didn't really think about state or local government at all. I was incarcerated at 17, and it was like at I started to see systems like through education, like I started to see systems in prison and how systems impacted lives, but I still didn't connect it to like government or policy work. I was released when I was 37, and I became a policy analyst for a community that CDFI is a community. I forget what that stands for, but it's like a something financial institutions, community financial institution, and I had to read all these white papers on like the Dodd-Frank and underbanking and housing burdens and food deserts. And I was reading about all these policies in Connecticut and national policies and how they were interacting and affecting communities. And I started to see like this manufacturing of our communities. And it led me to the LOB, the legislative office building, to like sit in these public hearings on housing, and it was just it was the most eye opening thing for me because there wasn't anyone in this room that looked like me, and I started to realize that so much of our lives was being structured in this building, and it was a building that was supposed to be controlled by community, but community actually had no say, no input, no investment, and that's what made me start looking at the impact of like municipal and state governance on like our everyday life and how like so many realities that for like that biases are built around and people can't see out of are actually being built in this building. Like they're being manufactured. And it triggered something in me that got me involved in like a different level.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I think we can both learn a lot from your guys' experiences, but specifically, I'm curious about how you think that local and state innovation can like fill gaps or play a role in making an impact that federal politics can't. And if you have like a specific example to speak to.
Sure. I guess I would say that, take education and housing issues. Most of the work really happens at the state and local level. And there have been cases in U.S. history like the New Deal and the Great Society when the federal government was much more involved in many issues, but and more recent examples like I guess the highways under Eisenhower in the 50s and then under President Obama, the Affordable Care Act, the federal government played a larger role in supporting healthcare, but in education and housing, almost all the resources really come at this more at the local level and to some extent the state level. And here in Connecticut, it's very topical because cities like New Haven are very dependent on property taxes, and we don't have the resources, comparatively speaking, that many other communities in Connecticut have, including some of the wealthiest communities in the whole country, and especially in Fairfield County. So there's been an effort for a long time to try to reduce the dependence on local property taxes of education funding and allow more of the resources to come from the state level. So there's been some progress, kind of fitful progress in that respect, but I think there's still a long way to go. And there's something called the Connecticut Council of Municipalities, or CCM, that happens to be based here in New Haven. They have an office, probably make a good internship opportunity, where they're trying to bring together different cities and to some extent suburbs, I guess, to try to lobby the state legislature to increase the flow of funds to communities that don't have the property tax resources that some of the rest of us.
Also, sorry to interrupt. If anyone has any questions like throughout the discussions, feel free to just raise them.
Yeah, I think the end of I don't know. I don't think we're a place of innovation. I think we've had poor reactions to negative innovation or to like we have a structure and it's so impactful. And this is all local and state governance structured. We look at the fact that you have desegregation in '68 through the Housing Right Act, but in '69 you have Connecticut creating zoning laws that give autonomy to all 169 cities and towns, which is why you have like the solidifying of really segregated borders, and you have the autonomy to reject and it not appear to be race central, but economic central. But economics and race correlate so tightly. So that way you don't notice how property taxes actually are sufficient in funding everything. The suburbs, like white suburbs, ensured that they would have 85 to 90% single family homeowner occupancies, which shores up their school districts because they have a robust property tax they take robust property tax in all of the public housing, the HUD funded housings, the voucher housings were concentrated into our cities. And our cities have from that point lacked the ability to take in property taxes. Hartford and New Haven have compounded issues, one being university not to be named that owns half the city. And in Hartford, there's a ton of problems. You have so many, it's the capital, so you have so many state buildings that don't pay property taxes, some municipal buildings that don't pay property taxes, colleges, a plethora of nonprofits, and 300 churches, right? In 18 square miles. So these are all non-property tax entities. But I think the real innovation that we run from is county structures, right? Because it's not that it's so innovative. Like we're not a state of we are the land of steady habits, and it has crippled our cities. Because that's not innovation. Just like early voting isn't innovation, or no excuse absentee ballots isn't innovation. It's a thing that the nation has said, oh, these things work, and we're just so slow to catch up. The innovation thing would be county governance, because then it'd be shared taxes. Like the money would be shared, and if you look at the structure of like Hartford and New Haven, they are financial centers. So people live in suburbs, but they work here. Mm-hmm. And so they pay no taxes here. And so having a shared tax revenue would actually show up. We have a scarcity mindset that is held most tightly by the wealthiest people and by the middle class, as if there's not enough. There's a ton of resources in the state. And so like I don't, and so to me, that's like that shows you how important state and municipal governance and politics are, because when you break your school systems, you break everything. You create the cycle that keeps everything broken. You don't have a labor market output that can build your economy. Your civics often fails, like you don't have the engagement, and the building blocks of what makes a community work are forever fractured if we're not finding innovative ways to show up our systems.
I guess I'm curious about like the current. I know you talked about a scarcity mindset, James, but I'm curious about like other challenges that we face that kind of act as barriers to solving, or not solving, but like mitigating these disparities or allowing them to become worse. Like I know that Yale, occupying so much space in New Haven is one of the huge challenges. So I would be curious to learn about like, other barriers that you guys think are important to acknowledge in state and local innovation.
Well, certainly funding constraints can be an issue, political polarization. And also I think there's often a real investment in the status quo. There are systems and organizations that are very used to the way things have been done, and it can be, because of that entrenchment, it can be difficult to sometimes even to imagine a different way of doing things, and even if imagine to bring it about. But there are certainly some promising things happening all over the country and various issues. And there are these organizations nationally, like the National Council of State Legislators and CSL. There's a state innovation exchange. And then there's the Conference of Mayors and League of Cities, things like that, that we encourage folks to look at for some promising that's happening. And even here in New Haven, we have some, I think, promising practices. Take, for example, the Friends Center for Children, where they're building housing for the early childhood workers there on the site to help them with the cost of housing. And they're trying to pay better than that sector usually does. And the state, through pressure from New Haven and elsewhere, has created this child care endowment of some $300 million to help support high quality and greater access to early childhood education in Connecticut. And there's actually a young Yale alum who's on the board of Alders, some of you may know, named Caroline Tandy Smith, who now, her day job is now working at the Friends Center for Children. So I encourage you to, if you haven't already had her come to speak, you probably have. She'd be a great speaker.
I think some of the biggest, hurdles, I really think it's lack of engagement. I think like so much knowledge is held like in Josiah, right? But but because that's what you do, right? And so
I'm a bit of a nerd too.
I mean, so much, so that, but I know a ton of nerds who know nothing about governance, right? Seriously, like you're not doing nothing about governance, and so to understand that there are certain institutions, certain organizations that really have built themselves into the fabric of consistent narratives of what the state is, you don't know. Or to understand that there are very innovative things happening around like early child education, and you don't know. I think that becomes the biggest hurdle, and how those things come to be, the processes that make them polarizing or unifying, you don't know. And when you don't know, you don't engage. And then these entities become, I think too many small fractions carry too much weight. And then they buy into the weight they carry. And we lose the idea of public service, or of serving the greater public good. And that's the biggest, for me, the biggest issue, because it's not, I don't necessarily think that, I think there are evil people. I think there are a few evil people though. I just think that we get so entrenched in thought and in groups that we don't think outside of them, and we're not forced to. And the forcing to think outside of them comes with more engagement. So when you lack engagement, and your engagement is only with your identifying group, right? You just become more and more tunnel vision. And so which is why you get extremists on both sides. I don't know. Yeah, you get stuff on both sides, but which is an education, which we like for all the education we have in the state that does work. This is one area that we haven't educated at all around, and it becomes the biggest hurdle. I think you see it play out like in election numbers, where it's we trend according to national approval or frustration, not realizing the actual effects that your state and your city are playing on those things, right? In your life every day.
Yeah, from what you both are saying, like I feel like I've noticed personally like a theme of like lack of seamlessness and like integration and collaboration between, lots of different like nonprofits or councils or organizations that are doing the same thing. And I know, Josiah, you're very interested in partnerships. So could you guys speak to like, the level of collaboration that's needed to achieve shared goals for maybe like better education, housing, increased jobs, and how that can be achieved?
You're asking a lot, but yeah, but I'll take one small slice, because where I now work in the area of child welfare, certainly partnerships are very important. We're a volunteer-based organization, court-appointed special advocates, part of the national movement. And the idea is that kids who are in the child welfare system have social workers, they have attorneys, of course, they have teachers and health professionals looking out for them. But all those professionals tend to have heavy caseloads or large class sizes, in the case of teachers, so that every child can benefit from having one adult looking out for them, just for them, or for a group of siblings. So that's where our volunteer advocates come in, and they're carefully screened, trained, and we try to support them with our small staff. But they build a relationship with the kids. They make recommendations to judges about their best interests. And then the idea is to promote resilience and ultimately result better outcomes for the kids. So very much it depends on our volunteers working with the attorneys, the social workers, the judges, health professionals, and others. And that theme of partnership, you can look at several other states with support from, there's the Doris Duke Foundation is a funder in this area, and they have this new effort they call opt-in opportunities for prevention and transformation, I think. And states like Kentucky, Oregon, South Carolina, and I think the District of Columbia are working with the Doris Duke Foundation on ways to try to prevent kids from winding up in the child welfare system in the first place, through supporting their families, helping the kids get more, have better attendance at school, get mental health resources, things like that. So, I could probably go on different issues, but I'll just stop there. That's one example.
Yeah, I think we rely on partnerships and allyships in order to move and especially ordership culture. A lot of our work is community facing. Within that, even though we're statewide, doesn't mean that we have a full understanding of every city. And so whenever we go into a city, we first look for who's doing that type of work in the city and partner with them, or who's doing the work in the city. We bring a very particular skill set to advocacy, and we get to offer that as a benefit to an organization. So like in Bridgeport, we work with Bridgeport Gym now, or with the Family Reentry Center. In the London, we work with a bunch of groups like Step Up in London, Hearing Your Places, the Brother Brunches. In Hartford is we have a hub for Hartford Mutual Aid, the Black and Brown Student Union, and colleges. We work with a ton of colleges. Yale really being our staple, Whitehall being our staple. Whitehall is like the kids in our development. We work with Guided by Purpose, building organization. And I think it's the only way to help build like our work is in tandem. So it's like we have to work in community to help build community. And I think the missing part of effective legislation is community, because legislators' jobs end once a bill is passed. They have nothing to do with implementation. And so if you don't have a community education and buy-in, a lot of stuff can be passed, sit on the books, and nothing shifts. We passed the law to restore the voting rights to men and women who are, the day they come home, they're taught to restore. What that looks like, though, there's nothing behind implementation outside of us working in halfway houses and doing outreach around right restoration. So we rely on partnerships to be able to that most efficient way to disperse information and have engagement.
My next question is kind of like on the student level. Do you guys have any advice for how people can get involved with driving change at the local level? And kind of like what institutions we can look to do that?
I would certainly encourage undergrads, we're talking about mainly undergrad grad students, to if they aren't already, connected to Whitehall.
Yeah.
And the numerous organizations around here that get students out to the community, like the public school interns, where you can get into the schools, meet children, meet their teachers, sometimes families. I mentioned the example of interning in the Congresswoman's office after volunteering on her campaign. There are a lot of things like that you can do. And just so many nonprofits in New Haven alone that are really within walking distance. And I mentioned the example of the Friends Center for Children. There's also, say, All Our Kin, started by two Yale alums, Jessica Sager and Jana Wagner. That's become a national model for early childhood. And they teach a class here at Yale. So anyone who's not already aware of them and interested in that issue, I encourage you to take their class. But you'll probably ask some additional questions about and finding mentors and so on. Because I do think that New Haven is pretty dense with potential mentors.
Yeah.
And also New York City is just a metro north right away.
Mhm.
I like the group called AWOL Nation. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they have this song called Kill Your Heroes. And I think like it's a model for me. I think students should engage with more students. Like across there are 100,000 college students in the state of Connecticut. We are the largest voting bloc in the state of Connecticut. And I think we have a poor model of student engagement and how you shift national issues locally. Right. So if you have student buy-in, right, like okay, so like I don't remember during COVID, during the height of the pandemic, Florida refused to shut down. Right? Why? Because they're a sovereign state. Like the federal government can only punish you through tax dollars. They can't do anything beyond denying you funding. You are yourself a sovereign who has signed on to be a part of a union, but you have rights, which is why Connecticut shored up women's reproductive rights when the Supreme Court said we're shutting this down. Right? They can shut it down, but they can't shut it down in Connecticut. And so if you had more student buy-in on the fact that this is actually your country, everybody else is old, their time is running out, and you shouldn't wait till you're, our age to get involved when you can actually start transforming on a local level and bring national change. You are the largest voting bloc in the state of Connecticut. And there's not enough. I don't think there's enough, and I'm on like damn near every college campus. There's really not enough inter-campus communications on issues to where you're able to platform and push on government. We have a lazy democracy, and it's like self-aggrandizement. They overstate their importance. They're not. They're public servants, which means that you actually pay for them for their jobs, and you can fire them, and you can push on them in ways that nonprofits can't. Because all nonprofits are either bipartisan or nonpartisan, but they can't you can support or advocate to a degree, but then your 501c3 also locks you out of doing any lobby. Like there's so much red tape around with this crap, but you actually can control. And I don't think that that's like a message or understanding that is pervasive or permeating enough throughout like the zeitgeist of colleges and the culture. Because you vote home. Like if you're from another state, you go, well, my state's having this issue. Cool. Let the college students in your state handle that. Flip where you're at, because you'll actually see I think the most progressive and direct resulting years of your life are your college years. Like on a municipal and state level. You can be the largest, but you're the largest voter bloc in Connecticut, in New Haven. If you look at Capital, Albertus, in Yale, in Southern, you're the largest voter bloc in New Haven. And you're in through all the colleges in any state, you're the largest voter bloc in the state. You should control the states, and you'll see national shifts.
Yeah. Yeah, so you both speak to different things, and I want to make sure we have time to touch on all of them. But Josiah, you mentioned like the topic of mentorship, and James, you mentioned like finding other students with similar interests. So I'm kind of curious, like combining both of those things, like how, like what steps can students take to seek out those networks or those connections to be able to like take small but steady steps towards goals that they may have or changes that they might want to see.
I would certainly say through either paid jobs, internships, professors, try to find potential mentors that you like and can learn from, and then don't be shy about approaching them for advice. Usually, when I was young, I benefited and I continue to benefit from mentors. I wouldn't be anywhere near where I've been in my career without all those who helped me along the way. And I think pretty much anyone would say that, that there's only so far you get on your own initiative. And, we have various privileges, and we depend on the people who have the wisdom and the positions to give us an opportunity. And I would say even more so now with AI affecting job searches. You may not even get an in-person interview. You may be just talking to a bot or something. So it's so important that you get to know people who then can appreciate you. And I think there will be some professors, even in large lectures, look them up in their office hours, find something out about their work from their websites, and arrange to talk to them. Those would be among the routes.
Sure. No, I think that's spot on for mentorships. As far as like connections, for me, if you go to Yet and you want to connect with other students from across the state, I think the White Hall is a great hub to help be a mediator in that. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of saying this is what you want. We want to be more engaged with with our generation across the state and figure out what's happening. Because sometimes you come here and you don't leave, like Josiah. You come here, you're like, yo, I kind of want to stay for a little while, right? So you get to know as many people as possible who are throughout the state. It's a very small and diverse state, and it's a very segregated state. And if you push to say this is what I want, then I think you tear down a lot of the walls across the state, across economics. But the same way that this extremely historic and super rich university sits here, you go 4 blocks that way, you have Capital Community College, right? Which is a higher demographic of students. So I think, and yet it may as well be, in the middle of Massachusetts sometimes. Like that's what the distance feels like. I think we do a great job of closing the distance and really creating force.
Awesome. So those were like our questions that were kind of more aligned with like learning about your experiences and also advice. But I kind of want to move to understanding the current landscape a little bit more. So under the current administration, how are you both changing or reorienting your work? And how do you think it has impacted? Kind of a loaded question, but how do you think it's impacted local and state politics so far?
Well, certainly funding has changed in various ways. Our CASA work, we're trying to reduce our dependence on federal funding, diversify, get money from the state, foundations, individual donations. And we're a pretty lean model because we are mainly volunteers, but we certainly do need funds to pay our few staff and our office and insurance and all that. So that's part of what we're doing. And, but also we benefit from being part of this national movement that is, as I was saying, nonpartisan. So we do have our sister organizations in what might be called red states, and they have to navigate the politics there, and So we work together, and I'm actually going to be attending a meeting of the CASA state directors in a few weeks. So we share ideas and do our best to, make the case that child welfare is something that shouldn't be a partisan issue. And in fact, today I haven't had a chance to read yet, but apparently the Trump administration is doing something around promoting opportunities for young people who've been in foster care to get employment, some kind of public-private partnership. So, I'll have to read up about what it means, but in principle, it sounds like something worth pursuing. So that's, on the face of it, encouraging. You'll have to learn more about what the details are. So, yeah, I'm sure James will say more about, federal versus state and local. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's a crapshoot, man. I think the force of this current federal administration has exposed the lackadaisicalness of the progressive states, and um in light of force, you lose so much. Connecticut is like the opposite mirror of our federal structure. We have majority Democratic House Senate governor, and yet in 6 years we have seen housing completely fall apart. You can't afford to live in Connecticut. And you can't afford to be poor in Connecticut. The poorest neighborhood, like you have neighborhoods in Hartford where the median income is $18,000, and the rent on a 2-bedroom is $1,400 a month, which means that the rent for the year matches the median income. Right? Like, so and that hasn't been seen as problematic to our current administration. Education, I think early child learning has been strengthened, but education in general has completely fallen apart to the point where our government said we can't just keep throwing money at it. It's an interesting thought process. We keep throwing money at the prison system. And this has nothing to do with our federal government. These are state decisions. I think the one place that we were extremely innovative in, when it was comfortable, was health coverage. Housing for Immigrants is a very progressive program that you don't see at a lot of states, and that's a state funded program. The ideology that there's $40 billion that somehow was trickling into undocumented immigrants coverage is false. States come out of their own pocket to create that coverage, and there you see this tension in the progressive caucuses around what to do with that. Our governor hasn't committed. His first 2 rejected budgets stripped everything. And I think coming out of this windfall of money from COVID, it just exposed a lot of shortcomings in what we've been doing in the state. And we're not prepared to take on an administration that is moving with such force. And it's a scary time for me, at least. I think it's a very scary time. I don't think we've seen the full implication of the force of the federal government on the state through federal policies yet. I think we'll see them towards the end of this administration in full effect between the roll up the tariffs and the actual Medicaid cuts. But I don't think we have the state structure that is built to withstand it. And as fast as you've seen 29 cities in this state flip from Republican leadership to Democratic leadership in like direct rejection of the federal movement, I don't know if you're going to see the same thing come state elections. I'm questioning if we're going to see that, and then that gets pretty scary. So on an organization level, funding, there's shifts in everywhere, but when I'm thinking about what our livelihoods are going to look like, especially in like the urban space, I don't think it's going to be like anything we've seen in our lifetime, like the 2008, the housing crisis. You don't see the impact in urban settings because you don't have strong homeownership, so you don't see the impact of this market, but fall collapsing and popping and people losing their homes, their livelihood. You don't see it. Like poverty kind of looked like poverty at all times until the social net that allows you to have health coverage, allows you to have assistance when your labor market is completely low, like it's low in labor, are disappearing. And then poverty looks really different. But so does the middle class, right? Like the total middle class will all, because if you mess, like if you have 30,000 people and it's like 180,000 between just 5 cities that are moved away from access health and out of Medicaid enrollment, well, we have legislation that doesn't allow the ER to turn down anyone. Just can't. But hospitals aren't in the business of accruing debt. So they pass the debt. And so when you who have some securities and jobs or for benefits, well, that all shifts. Your copay shift, your premium shift, because insurance, nothing about capitalism, no one in capitalism from the structure of the corporation is about accruing debt. That is for the consumer. And that's where you'll see that's the fearful part of what's coming. Mm-hmm. And how does the state get ahead of it? Mm-hmm. And is the state committed to getting ahead of it? Mm-hmm. Those are like the things that go through my mind.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, it's not great, but I think you described it in a way that's like very understandable and we can all learn from that. But I want to kind of expand on the part about like where we'll be in a few years and what that full force of the federal administration is going to look like. I think that in a time like this, it feels like policy is moving really fast and it's hard to catch up with the changes every day, especially the negative ones. So I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives on maybe some concerns that you may have for local and state policy and government and kind of just what that may look like in a few years.
Well, I thought James was exactly right to talk about Medicaid, and we're not going to feel that for a year or two, really. I think after the 2026 midterms, the planned cutbacks in Medicaid, that's going to have serious ramifications, and also the eligibility for SNAP. In the last few weeks, we've been dealing with the government shutdown and how that's going to affect SNAP, among other things. And the state has rallied to some extent. It looks like the SNAP funding may be restored, but yeah, the Medicaid will be under greater pressure. The public health policy at the federal level is really endangered. Vaccines and things that you just kind of take for granted. So states have had to rally to form coalitions around vaccine access, for example. And around housing, I think it is encouraging that Connecticut, there was apparently a bill passed, I think it did pass today, around trying to make some progress in housing. The earlier version had been vetoed, so this was a kind of a compromise that probably it's going to be very slow, limited progress, but something in terms of housing in Connecticut. What James was saying about zoning laws and local control means that I think there's only so much that's going to occur in Connecticut. Other states have, cities have the ability to annex their suburbs and kind of what you were saying about larger county presences. So that can affect school district funding, things like that. That's not going to happen in Connecticut at all. But, Connecticut has been running these surpluses and has set aside, I think, up to $500 million to help cushion some of the federal cuts. So that's progress. And there will be efforts to try to loosen, make more flexible the so-called fiscal guardrails that Connecticut has had in the last few years to which have funneled a lot of the surpluses into paying off long-term debt rather than, helping more immediate needs. So that, I think that tension will continue, that cities like New Haven will try to get more of that money. And let's hope we continue to run surpluses, because our state is highly dependent on Wall Street success. And like you were saying about the housing bubble, I think there's an AI bubble, and eventually that's going to burst.
Oh my goodness.
And the stock market's going to have a bad year, and that's going to hurt Connecticut's revenues, because people in Fairfield County are not going to be making all this money that Connecticut state is benefiting from. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but I tried to touch on a few.
Yeah, no, that's so spot on. I was so frustrated. So with the housing bill, because we're talking about a compromise bill, a super compromise bill that got vetoed, and we're talking about a compromised version of that compromise bill that you know what I mean, that goes through, and it's sadly it's like typical Connecticut. Sad, it's like super, like sadly, like I don't think we get innovation around how to grow an economy. I think it's because we have extreme poverty in the midst of extreme growth, and like in extreme proximity. And I don't think there's in any other state structured. Like you can drive this whole state. The state isn't measured in miles. It's 2 hours long, right? Like, so when you come through Fairfield, you come through like this, you come through these towns on this 30-minute drive. If you take the roads, it's probably like a combined income of like $1 trillion. Like literally between like property value and income, it's probably like $1 trillion. And then you just go right to Bridgeport. Boom. It's like that. Like, so I don't know if there's anywhere else where the extremes are like that. And I think it blinds our overall structure on how to build an economy, because it's not dependent on like innovation. It's not dependent on new revenue. Sadly, but our cities are, and I don't think our cities have done a strong job on that. They just kind of cater to the suburbs. So our housing stock, like Hartford, New Haven are putting up new buildings every day, but they're empty. Like they're half full at best. Like no one can afford to live there. You have to want to live in the city, and you have to come. You have to, but from the city, you can't afford to live there. So housing is going to be an interesting thing, and Medicaid is a scary thing. So I don't know. I really don't know. Like I sit back and wonder, like, what is this state going to look like 2 years from now? And that's a very short time. Like I don't know if we realize how short a time that is, that we can live in a complete, like we have an examples. COVID shifted everything in a very short period of time. Like it changed. We don't live in the same world, and that all happened in like a 24-month time span. Well, I think that in itself is coming again. Like not COVID, but the shift to where it's just a different.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of ways we can move the conversation based off what we've discussed, but I'm wondering if anyone has any like specific questions related to anything we've talked about so far.
I have one about engagement. I've been a lifelong resident of New Haven. And I'm also not going to call myself a political person. Probably somebody who's called me ignorant to politics. But what I noticed in my neighborhoods, in my community, didn't matter how much you engage, the neighborhood never changed. So the neighborhood politics inside of the city politics, the poverty always looked the same. The schools always looked the same, no matter who the mayor was, the governor was, this and that. So when you speak about engagement, how much of that do you factor in when you say the biggest problem we face is how much communities engage, when there are pockets, historical pockets, where community engagement has had a great return, and most of them are celebrated in books, depending if you want to go education, state, whatever you want to say Obama was probably the last great, wave, maybe little sprinkles here and there after that. But just from a community perspective, how much do you factor in when you say, they're not engaging? Is it a return on engagement, or is the lack of, like what you said, not knowing what's going on?
It's the complete lack. So you look at New Haven's registration rule, it's like 55,000 people. But yet on a mayoral election, 25% of that voter roll votes. And so there's no engagement. And so what that means is that if you look at where voting happens, that it's happening in Westville and East Rock. That's where you'll get your large turnouts.
The shore.
And the sure thing. Yeah, like those are the three neighborhoods, which are predominantly white neighborhoods. They are economically stable neighborhoods, higher income neighborhoods. The inner cities don't vote. And so our engagement is in community activism and in conversation, but it's not in turnout. Like we are a minority majority city, which means that the majority of your voting roll looks like you. But the majority of that 25% that's voting doesn't. That is our biggest issue. When you think about, we've only had 3 mayors in the last 32 years. That's that like New Haven in the we had freaking the Stefano for 20. We elected to do 10 straight
22 years.
20, and all he did was just sell so I mean and he's a different brand of politics. That was straight old school, one hand wash the other politics. And we had Tony Hart for I think 8 years. 6 years. And then now we've had Elliger, right? So we haven't had a variety of mayoral representation, and we've had stagnant older persons who don't necessarily who is still yet controlled by those 3 neighborhoods are still the biggest impacts in the order the order structure, which controls your budget, right? So I think there's a ton of work from an educational standpoint on exactly how governance works for our communities to really buy into the fact that there's never a reason why we're not having a return, because it's only 24 months that you have this office, and you really don't have to be there. Like we can, like, these are the elections that are strictly based on turnout. No electoral college, right? So which means that you have the ability to create your own equity, but we don't. I think I don't think we have a good historical viewpoint. We know there's been no return, but I don't think we realize there's been no investment. That we haven't invested in getting a return, but we haven't invested in controlling what's actually ours to control. So it's lack of engagement.
Probably worth saying something about immigration and how New Haven is one of the more progressive cities in welcoming people from all over the world. And that in the current administration, that's become more controversial, and there's some uncertainty about to what extent it's going to affect certain other aspects, funding streams. And there's been a series of lawsuits that our city, our state, other cities and states have been involved in. So we'll have to see what happens. But that's something that hasn't really come up. And I think the fact that New Haven is attempting to preserve its relatively enlightened, open-minded, and welcoming aspects, despite the pressures. It's worth acknowledging them.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about like Connecticut specific issues and just like the fragmentation between the different towns in Connecticut. But I guess my question would be like, on the New Haven level, what issues do you guys think that makes New Haven most vulnerable to federal changes, like immigration being one of them, but like economic mobility being another? Do you guys think that there are any other issues that we should be aware of when it comes to the federal administration?
Well, another good guest here would be Eliza Halsey. If you don't know who she is, she's a Yale alum who's done some interesting things, including start the Elm City Montessori School, I think it's called. And now she's working in the mayor's office as the community service administrator, I think, something like that. So she's dealing with all kinds of federal funding streams for community development block grants, for example. Who knows to what extent they'll be cut back in the future, and some housing money, and also the New Haven Board of Ed gets a lot of federal funding, for Title I and stuff like that. So special education funding is always controversial. There really isn't enough of that and that's not only in New Haven, that's in, I think, all over the state. People want more funding for special education. So, those are among the issues that are receiving attention.
Yeah. The state passed the Trust Act. I don't think we've seen the tension behind passing the Trust Act. I think it was the right thing to do. I know like a lot of advocates in New Haven, were pushing for this to be passed, which is just an agreement, a legislative agreement that the state will not cooperate with federal agencies when they are looking to come into the state and remove residents from the state, which empowers cities to stand on it, and do the same thing. I think the tension comes in though, and it's going to be like a trickle down tension is when other fundings get cut because of Trust Act. So it's going to be either that the Trust Act hold up, or do we not get $100 million from HUD funding? Right. And so like that is what's coming down the pipeline. And I think, I don't think any city's prepared for that. But I think there's a tension coming. And I don't know. I'm like, let it all fall apart. Like before you cave and hurt people, let it all fall apart. And then you rebuild. But I don't think that makes sense to most people where they're like, but then you have to be okay with having a certain number on harm. Like you're okay with harm like this, and I'm not. So
We've, there's usually a lot of attention paid to the fact that, generally speaking, blue states tend to contribute more to the federal government than red states. And there's been some discussion about if now the kind of the contract, the Congress having power of the purse of being overridden by the executive branch, and we're deciding what to spend money on, but just despite the fact that it was already agreed that blue states can withhold their contribution to the federal government by saying we can't really ensure that our contribution that we're required to pay is going to be spent in the way that our representatives negotiated with you, the other representatives, to be fulfilled. Therefore, until that's resolved, we're going to withhold that, which would mean that the federal government would really be crippled in a lot of ways because all of these states are the main source of its funding. I think in the case of California, it's like its own country. Connecticut is not its own country. It is a very wealthy state. Do you have any sense of where Connecticut ranks in terms of its ratio contribution to the federal government relative to other states?
I know there is something out of the state of New York. I think it's might be called the Rockefeller Institute that does a study of this each year, the kind of net donor state versus the net recipients. And as you say, Peter, it is just mainly the so-called blue states that pay more, and the red states that benefit more from federal funding. But I'm not one to argue for secession or I think we need
Northern Confederacy.
I think we need to keep the United States together, and I think people in blue states also need to acknowledge that disproportionately military service tends to come from red states, and that's an important service that everyone benefits from. So I think we need to keep this union together, but there does need to be more acknowledgement of that reality that, there's a lot of rhetoric around, wasteful government spending and so on. And to a large extent, that the money is going to constituents whose representatives are railing against that. So, the Infrastructure Act that was passed, there was often criticism of such legislation, but then the districts actually benefited, and many members of Congress were happy to take credit, whether or not they'd actually supported the
And politically, it
legislation.
didn't do any good for the
Yeah.
Democratic Party.
Yeah.
But I agree with you generally, I'm of the same mind that we want to, be cooperative and collaborative and everything. But in the context of a federal government that is actually targeting by politics, where money is going, where it's being to punish, based on politics. It sounds like the idea that we should be playing by some rules is kind of off the table. So I think a good question to say like, well, we're not advocating for a partisan, but on the other hand, we don't have to participate in a system that's designed to exclude us. So I'm just,
I don't think we have the leadership for that. I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. There's only so many things. Like it's simple, and you can complicate it, but you have a bully, and you just have to figure out what do you do with a bully, because they're always going to be a bully. So if you continuously just give, they're always going to bully. That's not going to change. But I don't think we have a government, a leadership structure that will think through any type of resistance. Our governor called for them to just cave 3 weeks ago. He was mad at wanting to cave 3 weeks ago. Like screw it, like because the issue doesn't impact his life, and he's not someone that sees how issues impact people that he can't relate to. This man also said we have a booming housing surplus actually, and then no, we don't. I mean, we do, but no one can afford to live in it. So he's not one who's like has an understanding of how average people live. He's a billionaire. And I think all rich people think alike. Or doesn't all of the philosophies and when I go out the window, they're wealthy, they understand wealth, and they understand what 1% means. And that's a very unified club.
Well, Franklin Roosevelt was very happy to take on his fellow, members of his class, and he earned their ire for it.
So,
And
oh,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
nah, so I'm from Fairfield County, like Stanford. So I've seen how that city has changed over the years through my lifetime. And even through COVID, how you had a lot of people coming from New York moving in. So when you think about and like now they're trying to like move further into like Bridgeport and towns like that. So when you think about this new group of people coming in that haven't really been in Connecticut for long, but have voting power in Connecticut, how do you reach them? Like, how do you, like, what's the approach for that for people like that?
I don't have one. Like, you can't door knock in Westport because there's no sidewalks, right? And the driveways are really long and dated. Same thing in Greenwich, like that. So I don't have them. My thing is like Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury are still majority cities. No matter what population comes in, they are 70%. They will not come in a big enough number. We don't understand how to control our politics. And so they can come in small numbers and just change everything because they come in with money. But civics, grounds, all parts of society. It's like it's the structure they built it upon. You can control your politics, which means that you can control how all money goes in your city. And we don't have that understanding. So we don't have an understanding yet. And that's a conversation. I'd rather invest in that conversation with us than try to convince the few. To me, I'm still empowering them. I'm acknowledging that they have more power than me. I need to convince them of something, rather than saying that we got the people, we have more power than them. We need to recognize it and change things. And that has to be the investment because you're not going to, you'll never convince power to succeed.
I guess I have like kind of like a follow-up question to that. So, what is the role of college students since college students make up such a large proportion of the population in Connecticut, with Yale and all the other universities that take up so much space? Like, how do we, I'm trying to understand how to write this question, but how can college students be like a force for change, but also what limitations do we have?
Yeah, can I also add basically what Catalina and I had talked about with the previous nonprofit organization was, and I know James, you and I previously touched on this as well, but how do I guess what Emily is trying to say is like, how do we make it feel that we're not just putting like a band-aid on these structural issues and we're actively producing, systemic changes, which we truly are very limited at with our current resources, etc. But as we even progress into life, how do we kind of change those little band-aids into more structural or systemic changes?
Well, I know Josiah touched on like all of the internship and volunteership opportunities that there are in the city. I think what those opportunities bring to you is an understanding of like on the ground issues, right? But it's about what you do with what's about what you do with the understanding. Voting locally, you would, so for instance, like, I see, I grew up in the city. I see how the city has changed, right? I see how the university has expanded. I'll see how like neighborhoods that have been historically Black or historically Hispanic have also shifted. And how does that happen? In Hartford, the north end of Hartford is historically Black, and now it's changing, right? Well, colleges, you have the ability to push back on a lot of that. Like, and there, if you have a buying in a relationship, a local relationship, and you're willing to stand on it in the whole community, you empower, you fill in gaps. 3,000 votes in this city from college students fills in a gap for a lack of voting that is happening in some of our urban spaces until that picks up, right? So you're able to stay and shift things. You have a talking stick, you have a voting block. And it doesn't take a ton of resources to that because a vote is free. You've already earned it. You're born with it, or you got it through. So this like you have it, use it, and use it locally. And even if you don't have it, I think your voice is just as important because you understand certain realities that those who do have it need to take into consideration when they're voting. And so that's just a grounding and a push that I think all college students need to buy into.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much, James and Josiah, for coming. Does anyone have any last questions? If not, we've had a wonderful discussion, so really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Yes. Pleasure.
I think there's
Thank you.